In 2 weeks and 1 day, the world will mark a grim first anniversary of the October 7th attacks and the war that has ensued. With the events of this week in Lebanon, that conflict now threatens to further engulf even more of the Middle East. 1,000 miles north in Ukraine, that war continues to grind on. President Zelensky told me last week about the peace plan he intends to present to President Biden in coming days. But as in the Middle East, the two sides are so far apart, it's difficult to foresee a speedy end to the conflict. This is despite much debate about it at the United Nations. On Thursday, I traveled to the organization's headquarters in New York to talk to Antonio Guterres, a former Prime Minister of Portugal. Guterres has been UN Secretary General for nearly 8 years. Mr. Secretary General, pleasure to have you on.
It's a great pleasure to be with you again here in the UN.
I want to ask you your reaction to the news of the moment, which has been this, what appears to be an Israeli intelligence operation that has detonated, exploded these various communications devices in Lebanon among Hezbollah fighters.
What worries me more is what this means as the potential of a much more dramatic escalation, of a full-blown war. These devices were made to explode now, according to the information that come, because someone was discovering that they had the bombs.
Right.
And so they had to be exploded.
Use it or lose it, yeah.
But the logic of this kind of devices is for a preemptive strike in a major military operation to dismantle the communications capacity of your adversary. So the fact that these things existed means that there is a potential for a much stronger escalation, and that is what concerns me. The possibility of transforming Lebanon in another Gaza, which I think would be a devastating tragedy for the world.
And why do you think it has been so difficult to get any kind of a ceasefire or any kind of a deal at this point?
You mean
between Israel and Hamas, even some talks between Israel and Hezbollah?
Neither the government of Israel nor the Hamas really want a ceasefire. That for me is obvious. What is on the table is quite reasonable. And both sides should be in a position to accept. And until now we see that whenever there is a new development, some new complication arises. And it is for me clear that both sides are not interested in a ceasefire, and that is a tragedy, because this is a war that must stop. Of course, it started because of the horrendous terror attack of the 7th of October, but then it triggered a military operation that has reached a level of death and destruction that I do not remember in any other in my lifetime. And as I condemned very strongly the action of Hamas, I also think we need to condemn the fact that there is an attempt to have a collective punishment of the Palestinian people.
Do you think that the UN has any role to play in a post-war Gaza?
That will depend on the will, of course, of Israel and the will of the Palestinians. We are ready to do what we will be asked to do, but as I said, we are not here seeking any protagonism. What we want is a solution. And we admit that for Israel there might be an interest, for instance, in a coalition of countries, both Western countries and Arab countries, to guarantee a transition. For us, what is important is that whatever the transition mechanism that is put in place, it is done with the involvement of the Palestinian Authority, and it is done as a step for the two-state solution to become a reality. Because, many people say the two-state solution is becoming not possible because you have the settlements that are moving on, more and more areas grabbed in the West Bank by both settlers and by the authorities. The point is, okay, what is the alternative? how can we conceive in the 21st century a one-state solution in which millions and millions of Palestinians would have no rights, would have no citizenship, would have a situation of total segregation? That is absolutely inconceivable.
Do you regard that as an apartheid condition?
Apartheid is a specific thing in a specific country. I believe, I don't like to use the same expression, but what we would have is indeed a situation of segregation of one people within a state controlled by another people, and that is something that is unacceptable. It would be indeed similar to the situation that we had in South Africa.
You know that there are many people who believe that the UN agency, the relief agency that works with Palestinian refugees, has been either intentionally or somehow used as almost a party to the war, has been willing to hide fighters, hide weaponry, been biased against Israel. How do you answer those charges?
There are many things, but there is a fact. And the fact is that there was an infiltration of a few elements that indeed participated in the 7th of October. And that has no justification, that is totally unacceptable, but we need to understand the conditions in which organizations work in Gaza for years in the circumstances of control that Hamas has in Gaza. But in fact, that happened. But then a lot of things have been invented that do not correspond at all to the truth. Of course, there are tunnels below the premises of UNRWA, as there are tunnels everywhere in Gaza. But there has never been any commitment of UNRWA in general to provide any kind of support to Hamas. This is very clear. If Hamas got some support in key moments, it was not from UNRWA. It was namely with Israel. As everybody knows, the government of Israel in the past was interested in the development of Hamas in order to fraction the Palestinian leadership. And there was a period in which Hamas received to pay the salaries of their staff from the Gulf, money that was coming through Israel and that was distributed through Israel to Hamas in Gaza. So if there is an entity that has no moral authority to attack UNRWA in relation to what was done to support Hamas, it's the State of Israel.